What the staff of this hospital experienced was unbelievable. Every hour, a pigeon flew in through this man's window. The bird would sit on his bed for a few minutes and then fly away again. Doctors did not understand at first why this pigeon kept doing that every hour. But when they discovered the reason, no one could hold back their tears. John Carlson had been in the city's local hospital for over a week. He had had treatment on his eyes, and for this, he had to stay in the hospital for at least 3 weeks. Doctors and nurses hoped that relatives or friends would visit him during that time, but human visits never came. The staff present felt quite sorry for him and tried to stop by for a chat as often as they could. But John did not seem to mind at all. In fact, when he thought the nurses were not looking, some staff even saw him chuckling secretly. What was this man having such fun with? The first time that the staff started to realize what was going on was when they heard a strange noise coming from his room. The window was always ajar so that fresh air could enter the room. But the sound of the wind was not the only sound coming from John Carlson's room. A tapping and soft cooing sounded from his dormitory. Sisters who were about to walk into his room with lunch were startled. A pigeon sat on the foot of his bed and looked directly at the women. They chased the pigeon away, as vermin were not welcome in a sterile hospital. But this pigeon was here for a reason and would soon return. An hour later, it was another hit. They received a report from the room immediately adjacent to Mr. Carlson's. The walls were made of thin plaster material, making even the softest sound easily audible between the two rooms. The man in the adjoining room said he heard another soft cooing and also heard Mr. Carlson laughing out loud. But when the sisters walked into his room, there was no bird in sight. John Carlson was asleep, but on the edge of his bed was a small pile of nuts and seeds. "What is going on here, Mr. Carlson?" one of the sisters asked. John said nothing. Indeed, he pretended to be deep asleep and did not respond to the woman's question at all. But these sisters would not be fooled. They knew that Mr. Carlson was keeping something from them and that it had to do with that same pigeon. Why else did he have birdseed on his bed? They decided to watch him closely, and soon they would be in for a big surprise. They decided to walk past his door every 10 minutes, which they had secretly left ajar so as to be able to see inside. And they didn't have to wait long until they caught him in the act. Because exactly an hour later, they happened to be watching from the crack in the door when at that very moment, the little intruder came flying in again. The pigeon perched on the windowsill and walked around there for a brief moment, but soon the bird jumped onto the edge of the bed. It was a special moment because what happened next, no one saw coming. The pigeon ran over Mr. Carlson's blankets towards his pillow and plucked at his leg. It was hard to see at first, but the pigeon then overtly put something down next to John. It was a tiny note tightly coiled around the bird's legs. Mr. Carlson, who before was obviously pretending to be asleep, opened his eyes and whispered softly, "Thank you, Rosa." He scattered birdseed on the bed beside him, confirming the sister's suspicions from the note. Unexpectedly, he lit the note on fire, alarming the nurses who rushed in to intervene. John managed to grab the pigeon before it could escape, whispering to it before guiding it out the window. The nurses scolded him for his behavior and locked the window. Refusing to explain, John closed his eyes. However, an hour later, a report revealed that neighboring rooms had open windows, causing a pigeon influx. The pigeons provided distraction, allowing Rosa to slip back into John's room unnoticed, carrying another note attached to her leg. This pigeon had fooled the entire hospital staff thanks to leading a large group of homing pigeons. She could do this because she was the leader of this flight. That's what you call a large group of birds, of homing pigeons. Rosa normally steered the pigeons for races, but now they were her Trojan horse, and all to smuggle in a note. But what did it say? John looked at the note and now started laughing elaborately. He gave his dove a kiss and then placed her in front of him again. He thought he was alone now, so he was a little less careful. After all the staff were busy with the distraction Rosa had created for him, but nothing was further from the truth. For one clever sister had made the link with John. She had lingered near his room and was now sneaking a peek through the crack in the door. She saw John petting his pigeon as he grabbed a piece of paper and pen from his bedside table. "Caught, John! What are you doing?" she shouted as she flung open the door. John knew his ruse was over. He couldn't keep this up forever, and he wanted to keep receiving the notes his pigeon brought him. So maybe it was a better idea to just confess honestly after all. He waved at the sister, thereby inviting her to take a seat on a chair next to his bed. "Come sit down, madam, and then I will tell you everything," he pronounced. The sister took a seat next to the sighing John Carlson and listened intently. John slowly rolled open the paper roll he had detached from Rosa's paw. He explained that he had been a pigeon fancier for over 40 years. That's what you call someone who raises pigeons and trains them for competitions. He also confirmed that Rosa had been his best pigeon for over 10 years. She was the leader of his entire flight of birds, and at his direction had sent all other pigeons to the hospital. This fact, of course, the sister had already realized. Indeed, that was the reason why she did not fall for that cunning ruse and had stuck around John's room. But why then? Why does Rosa keep coming back here every hour with a note? She asked the old man. According to John, it all had to do with his granddaughter. With this girl, John had a great bond. They did everything together, and they saw each other every day. But when John had to go to hospital for his operation, they unfortunately could no longer see each other. "Can't she just visit?" the nurse asked him. She looked at him questioningly and saw that John suddenly started crying softly. "No, that is unfortunately not possible," he confirmed as tears rolled down his cheeks. "But why not then?" "That's not possible," John replied. In fact, his granddaughter was also sick in bed herself. She had fallen ill with chickenpox just before John was admitted to hospital and was quite sick from it. And besides having a high fever, she was of course also highly contagious. The hospital therefore did not admit both her and her mother. "But then why can't you call her once in a while?" the sister asked him. A logical question, but John Carlson had an immediate answer to that too. "So that's all your fault," he shouted angrily, wiping a few tears from his face. John explained whatever the doctors told him on the first day of his stay. When John was undressed for his surgery, all his belongings were stored in a safe: his shirt, his shoes, and also his mobile phone. He still asked if he could please keep his mobile phone with him so that he could call and text his granddaughter, but this was forbidden to him. John was forced to take rest and sleep a lot. Lots of phone calls and especially staring at a screen would hamper his recovery, so his mobile phone was taken away from him. They assumed that he would have visitors, but did not know that his granddaughter could not possibly visit. Therefore, they devised a plan. They would use the carrier pigeon Rosa to communicate secretly. Rosa was great at tracking down John and could fly like no other. Within half an hour, she flew from his granddaughter's house to the hospital. This way, the two best friends could secretly stay in touch. It would be their secret. And to make the secret extra interesting, they would burn every written message after reading it, so it would be hidden from the rest of the world forever. A kind of offline Snapchat, his granddaughter called it. The sister smiled cautiously, while by now she too had tears in her eyes because of this touching story. She stood up and told him she was going to do her best to arrange something special for him and his little sick friend. After half an hour, she returned to the room. She returned with a broad smile on her face, and she was not alone. In fact, the story had been shared with the other staff, and now that they all understood what was going on, they couldn't help but help. "Sorry for the misunderstanding. Your recovery is important, but mental health is perhaps most important. We don't want to forcefully keep you away from your granddaughter, and that is why we have something for you," it was pronounced. John was handed an old phone. The device had no screen, which doctors said would already have a less delaying effect. Mr. Carlson smiled back kindly as he was able to dial his granddaughter's number again for the first time in a week. He stroked Rosa's head once more, before gently guiding her out through the window again. "I don't need your help anymore, baby. I'll see you back home soon," he spoke in a soft voice. The phone rang, and his granddaughter picked up. They had never seen anyone so delighted by a simple phone call. He talked to his granddaughter for over an hour, and both laughed at length about the clever ruse with Rosa. His pigeons now stayed neatly at home and kept watch until John was discharged from hospital again. And that moment would come sooner than expected. For although the doctors had expected John to stay for at least another 2 weeks, his health improved considerably after just a few days. The positive input from calling restored his mind and with it his body at a rapid pace. A touching story that hospital staff would not soon witness again. And it all started me that clever homing pigeon called Rosa. If this story touched you as much as it did us, you should watch this video. Elephant keeps following man, but he is shocked when he sees why. Click here to get the full story.